Welcome to Phantom Podcast Network. This is Legal Mullet Podcast, a celebration of 1980s action cinema, celebrating the heroes of yesterday: Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Bruce Willis, Van Damme, all the way down to, of course, the B-grade action films that we all enjoyed on VHS, and of course Betamax. From those of American Ninja all the way through to Sidewalk Cop and beyond. Here at Phantom Podcast Network's Legal Mullet Podcast, join Adam O'Brien as we celebrate action movie cinema.
I'm sitting here waiting, contemplating what's the best day. Watching action movie, I'm the Legal Mullet.
Welcome back, folks, to episode number 74 of Legal Mullet Podcast. I'm your host, Adam O'Brien, coming to you live from the Quinlan's Cantina, home, of course, of the Panther from Down Under, Legal Mullet, Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast, and, of course, the other one, the Mullet Guild. Look at Dune. That's right, folks, we're here today to celebrate Jackie Chan. That's right, Jackie Chan in a movie that didn't quite hit its mark. It didn't make what it needed to be a success at the time. It was a time when Golden Harvest were trying to get Jackie Chan over to the United States to become a bit more of a worldwide sensation, not just a legend in Hong Kong. We're going to talk about that movie and why I really enjoyed it. I've always liked this movie, and we'll get into that very, very soon. So me, the host, Adam O'Brien, is going to take you down memory lane with that one, and we'll also talk a little bit about the film that he did also to try and break into the American market. And that is, of course, known in some circles as Battle Creek Brawl, and the other one, of course, is the one, the only, Big Brawl. But tonight, we're going to be talking about the film The Protector. And this is a film that really sort of heads him into more of a straight-ahead American crime action sort of a feel. There's a little touch of Rush Hour in this, only a lot more real. And this is what I really like about it. You get to see Jackie Chan play things quite a bit differently. There's not the comedy that you're used to. Still lots of stunts. And in some ways, there's even some great stuff where you get to see him do kind of a Miami Vice take, particularly in intro. And it's very much a James Bond meets American crime thriller. Same sort of thing you see later in other movies that he did in Police Story and Crime Story as well. But the difference is a lot of those were played for laughs as well. In this one, it's not. And the one thing that's going to freak you out, I'm almost lost for words about it, you're actually going to see him swear in this. And I'm not just meaning like he did in other movies recently where he played it for laughs. This is, him being tough and quite scary. All right, so this is a movie he did with Danny Aiello, which a lot of you will know from Great American Films. The late Danny Aiello, unfortunately, one of the great films I really have always enjoyed him in is, of course, Hudson Hawk, and it's one we've done earlier this year on the podcast. But before we get into it, it's time to let you know how you can subscribe to this show, check out us, and of course, check out FPN.
The number you have dialed has been changed. The new number is...
G'day, man, how you going? Follow the Legal Mullet here on Phantom Podcast Network's master channel at fpnet.podbean.com or subscribe on the Podbean app where you can find all the shows. Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast. Culture Clash, a weekly look at pop culture. You look at Making Treks, a Star Trek fan podcast. You can also check out the Mullet Guild, a look at the Dune universe from me, the Legal Mullet. You can also check out this show and all the others like What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, and much, much more. All on FPN. You can follow on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all podcatchers. Make sure you follow me, the Legal Mullet, at The Legal Mullet on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Alright, so now you know where to check out, of course, the channel, and it's ever growing. One of the big ones that we don't mention a lot of is, of course, the YouTube channel now, Phantom Podcast Network. And the boys have been working very, very hard over there. Of course, Kevin and Kyle putting this together and getting it out there. It's become more of a video show, but also it's kind of like an old TV show where you had the sort of call-ins and stuff like that, where people would call in and talk about TV shows and movies and stuff like that. And of course, they celebrate it just like they do on the podcast there. So definitely go and check that out. They've done some really good work. And a lot of the live shows have been a lot of fun, people getting involved. But of course, go up there, check it out. And of course, whatever you do, subscribe, because all the shows are going to be on there soon. Whether it's Type 40, Lethal Mullet, Making Treks, the Mullet Guild, all the stuff that I'm involved in on the network will be there eventually as well. You can also check us out on the Facebook page at The Lethal Mullet, where I do some live shows from time to time there as well. You'll be seeing that more and more as we get more video orientated, of course, and be all technical and what. It's all James Bond like, isn't it? Quartermaster coming out and all these little gadgets. But we'll get into that soon. But guess what, folks? It is time for the news.
Now it's time for the latest action news from the cinema and martial arts movies and more, all here on the Lethal Mullet podcast.
Alright folks, here's the news. We're going to be looking at, of course, and click away and check out some of the stuff that we've been seeing on the great Australian site, darkhorizons.com, run by Garth down in Sydney. It's just a fantastic website that we've been following for probably more than 20 to 30 years out here. It feels like it anyway. There's always great reviews. There's always great news up to the point with pop culture and, of course, action movies and sci-fi movies. So go and check it out. darkhorizons.com. Some fantastic stuff there. And, of course, all the latest trailers. But some of the stuff that's popping up, of course, Justice League. We've got Deathstroke coming back, apparently, in that one. And, of course, the Joker. So that's been talked about. It's interesting that they're sort of turning it into more of a mini-series now. We hear that it's obviously so many different elements he's trying to bring into this Justice League that he imagined. And some might think that this is more of a reimagining of his idea from when he was putting it together. Also, we have The Meg to get a sequel, which is interesting. Now, this is a movie I've watched once, and I was a little intoxicated when I did, but I enjoyed it. It was a fantastic film. Particularly, it's an adrenalized version of Jaws in some ways. And, of course, you get Jason Statham. And Statham's always great in these sorts of, crazy ideas for action movies, I think. It's fantastic. So, good to see him on there. The other one is now Simon Kinberg, who you might know from a certain X-Men film. He's worked with Star Wars circles. I believe it was on Star Wars Rebels. And, of course, he's putting together he's penning anyway. It doesn't say he's directing it at this stage. Battlestar Galactica. Now, whether it's going to be a reboot, whether it's going to be still in the same universe as the 70s series, I mean, that would be great. Who knows? But, of course, the later one that was done in 2003, 2004 by Ronald Moore is still to this day classic. They just didn't know how to wrap it up. Come on, Ronnie. Don't just go all 2001 on us. My goodness. That last season was the pits. But again, it's interesting. Always good to see a Battlestar Galactica film put out there too. I really want to see Buck Rogers, though, done. I mean, who knows? One day we might get it. And obviously, too, the big thing about that is that we've also got with the many things that they mention when it comes to the DC stuff out there. We've got James Gunn's The Suicide Squad, which, of course, Kyle's been talking about quite a bit on one of the previous episodes that we did with him, with Krull. And, again, it was an interesting one, the fact that, obviously, James Gunn's kind of rebooting this, but also making a sequel at the same time. So you're getting both things in the same movie. Interesting. I do like James Gunn, but I still think, to this day, he's a one-trick pony. James Gunn puts out these films which are very, very crowd-friendly. They're a bit risque in their humour at times, but also the characters are pretty damn good. I'll give him that. So he's good with characters, good cooking up that sort of stuff. But story-wise and, just the action-wise, it's not my cup of tea. Gotta say. So, James Gunn, you've got to impress me a little bit more than just putting it out that way. Put it that way. But I like what you're doing with John Cena. So, I'd like to see what's going to happen there too. Overall, I think it's pretty damn good. Now, on social circles, I've started following some amazing people. Some of these are people that I think we should have probably been starting to follow a long time ago. And one of those just happens to be the amazing, the excellent, let's just say, Alexander Nevsky. And of course, Nevsky's fantastic because he was a guy that years ago put out a film that was basically Raw Deal all over again. And of course, he's playing a real Russian, unlike Jean-Claude, what's his name? Not Jean-Claude Van Damme, it's a Schwarzenegger film. My God, I should have my lethal mullet license revoked for that. Not that knowledge. But no, it's, the fact that obviously he's such a big guy already and such an amazing presence. And he really is. He's a huge Arnold fan too. A lot of people don't sort of put two and two together, but he is a huge Arnold fan. But he's also a journalist now too. So he's a producer, a writer, Mr. Universe, and he has a book out too called 3 More Reps, folks. Go and check that out. But it's great. What I love about his action is it is literally in the 80s vein. If there's a lethal mullet, to be ambassador of, it would be this amazing action hero. He's just huge. But obviously a big geek of action movies too, which is just fantastic. So a big, huge hello to Mr. Nevsky. All the best, my friend. You are fantastic, and we love you here at the Lethal Mullet Podcast.
Alrighty, mate. Time to go down to the pub for a pint, chat, action movies and more. Here on the Lethal Mullet Podcast.
Right, folks, we're here to chat The Protector. Of course, this is a 1985 Hong Kong American film directed by James Glickenhaus. It's, of course, as we mentioned, starring Jackie Chan, Danny Aiello, and Roy Chow. Yes, that name you may know from Bloodsport and, of course, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That's right. It is, of course, the great actor played Senzo Tanaka. And, of course, Bloodsport and trained Jean-Claude Van Damme in the ways of the ninja. Now, this film is really an interesting film. It's one that came after the Big Brawl, or better known as, of course, Battle Creek Brawl. It's his second attempt to get into the American market. And of course, they're not used to the kinds of films that he was doing, even in the 70s and up into the early 80s. A guy who is probably the most amazing athlete when it comes to physical stunt work. I mean, true athlete, a tumbler, somebody that can do an amazing amount of acrobatics, and also, of course, the amazing work that he did in, just martial arts. Even though obviously, as we've talked about before, the stuff that Jackie Chan does is based on, theatre work that they do in the Peking Opera. So, which is, of course, a lot of the sort of stuff you see him doing. The amazing stuff that's basically stunt work in its best form, but also, it's an art form. One communicating, obviously, his ways through these physical stunts, tumbles, and, of course, amazing feats of, physicality. Now, obviously, with the way that Jackie Chan had been already in the market since the late 60s, early 70s, he'd already been working with the likes of Bruce Lee and many of the other amazing teams and directors over in, of course, Hong Kong. So it's interesting, he's sort of coming into his prime, obviously being a huge star in Hong Kong and the Chinese film market over there, and then to obviously try his hand at getting into the American market. So it's interesting, look at these early attempts at, finding a new audience, a new demographic. And again, these films are very interesting films, particularly in 1980 when The Big Brawl came out. That was one movie that really sort of, I suppose, in some ways, played more to his humorous side. And of course, he had Mako in that film, and of course, the Emperor of the Known Universe from Dune was in that movie, obviously a couple of years before he did the role. And there's, of course, Jose Ferrer. And it's just great. It had a great feel. It had there's a certain feel to, I think, the actual film that is very reminiscent of what we see Jackie Chan do years and years later. And that's not until, obviously, the likes of Rush Hour and, the others that he really broke through. Rumble in the Bronx is probably the one that really put him on the map. And particularly for the American market, they got to see not only just the martial arts, but just the daring do that this gentleman does and his team, and obviously the amazing the directors that work on these too. So there's two official versions of this movie, which we'll also go through and chat about as well. It is an interesting sort of take on things as well as we get through it. And the movie is basically a bit of a revenge story in some ways. So we'll get into that now too. So as we open the movie, this is in the theatrical edition that you see in US. You probably see it out here in Australia, as well. So Jackie Chan plays Billy Wong, who is a New York police officer, and his partner Michael, played by Patrick James Clark. Now, Patrick James Clark, I do believe, played a captain in some of the Jeff Wincott movies, and possibly even, I think it was Hard to Kill as well. But unfortunately, I haven't been able to find too much about him, so I'll have to check that out another time. So it basically opens up in this where they're trying to chase down a truck that's getting basically ransacked, and it starts out, it feels like Escape from New York. It feels a real kind of we say like a John Carpenter sort of a feel. And we see Billy and Michael hot on the heels of the truck, and they come out, and actually here's the interesting point. Billy is carrying an early bullpup assault rifle as well in it too. And anyway, as they're trying to chase down the people involved in it, they get to a bar, and the same crooks break into the bar and try to take out the customers and stuff. But Michael and Billy are there, and what goes down there is one of the most hardcore action scenes I've ever seen in Jackie Chan's history. And this is why I think this is something that didn't go well down with the regular fans of Jackie Chan stuff. What happens is we see his partner unfortunately get killed by this group of thugs. And then we get to see a tough side that Jackie had never seen. I think this is why the American market was sort of heading into the sort of harder edge Jackie Chan for him to sort of do well over there. It's because you get to see him start to do quite a bit of gunplay in this, and it's not light work. It is full on. You see blood, you see some brutality. And at that time, you also see, obviously, too, Wong basically do this huge foot chase all across New York harbors. And this whole scene is fantastic. We get to see an American-style stunt work in the chase. And, of course, part of the chase is they go to the docks. When you see Billy go to the docks, he jumps, and he does a classic jump over a fence down into the lower part of the dock. And, of course, we, as Jackie Chan fan, knows that he can easily do this. Hot on the heels, he can't follow the crook, but he then bails up one of the guys fixing his own boat on the side and basically says, "Give me your effing keys." When I heard that, I was like, wow, because I can't remember that on the Australian VHS edition that came out here years ago. So interesting, but it's on the DVD, folks. Yes, he swears. So this is a very, very different character for him. So after this, he obviously goes and they have a funeral for his partner. And after the funeral, he goes back to his headquarters, the police precinct. He basically gets busted down to crowd control for all of his dramas. But then he actually goes to find his pal, his new partner is Danny Garoni. And of course, that's Danny Aiello, who's also he's basically a guy that's been busted down due to being brutal as a police officer. So you can see both of them have kind of got a dark side to them, a bit on edge, and this is what makes it really interesting. But also the script here is really leading towards more of a gangster movie, and it's great, particularly the one-liners coming out from Danny, and then just the they really play off each other quite well. There's a comedic edge that Danny has here, but it's a dark comedic edge. And of course, in one of the great scenes here is that they go to a fashion show undercover, hosted this one by Laura Shapiro, who's the daughter of a gangster by the name of Martin Shapiro. And we get to see, again, these terrorists that kind of look like the ones that we're going through. But what happens is they kidnap a girl from this place. And it's find out later that Harold Coe, played by Roy Chow, and Martin Shapiro, the gangsters, are suspected of taking drugs through from Hong Kong to New York. And the Coe has taken Laura and to Hong Kong, and he's holding her for ransom. So, part of this is they start to figure out that there is heat in Hong Kong. So, there's some great scenes where they find out, obviously, the leads and where they have to obviously go. And there's a massage parlor scene, which is hilarious. It's almost the total opposite of what you saw in Shanghai Noon. But, of course, they find out about Shapiro's main bodyguard, the Big Kahuna. This is one of the most legendary martial artists. And, of course, Lee Fillings has talked about this same martial artist in the previous show of Brotherhood of the Wolf. We're talking because of the amazing Bill the Superfoot Wallace. So they're hot on the trail. So what follows is pretty much Rush Hour. It really is. It's Rush Hour 2, where they go to Hong Kong. What's interesting about that is that when they go to Hong Kong, obviously it's everything that you're used to seeing in an American film is thrown on its head. So this is the great sort of tipping point as well. When we see a lot of the stuff that we see, Roy Chow over in Hong Kong being the main crime boss as Coe, is just fantastic. This guy has always got the charisma that just drags you in. Somebody with real leadership and real power. You could just see it emanating off the guy. And he's fantastic in the role. Really good. But out of all of this, we get a great showdown in this film. And it's a showdown unlike any other. This is an amazing fight between Bill Wallace and Jackie Chan. And I think it's kind of a testament to where things would go later with, obviously, some other American fighters, which Jackie would then fight against in other films. Also Australian fighters too, with the likes, of course, of Richard Norton in City Hunter. These are people which are, hugely skilled martial artists, and playing off, somebody like Jackie, who is not just a martial artist. He's obviously somebody who's incredibly gifted, acrobat, stuntman. But I think part of what was happening is, in later films, and not just this one, there was a certain grittiness or a grit that Jackie was trying to bring into his films. And by bringing in real fighters, Benny the Jet Urquidez is probably the big one with, Wheels on Meals and obviously Dragons Forever, which really showed up some amazing, real full-on, you're getting hurt in those scenes. There's so much stun play. But at the same time, you've got, obviously, a real fighter that can take a hit, that can take some of those blows and really, really go to town. And that's what I think it makes it so believable and amazing, too. The film has got a dark edge to it. And if you're not used to Jackie without all the gags, because, it is a lot of gags in this one that they bring forward, then you're not going to have the same feel that you had in other films that Jackie's put together. But with that, Jackie Chan actually put together a Hong Kong version. It's his own edit, basically. Things were added to it, changes here and there, and obviously one of the big ones was that you also got to see, a little less of that sort of dark edge, I suppose you could say. And again, it's without a lot of the blood. But I think the big part of this is that they don't just have there's certain of particularly Billy and Danny. It really is that sort of more realistic turn of the sort of play you see later, which was played for laughs at Rush Hour and even Shanghai Noon. Again, partners that they meet as they go through. It's not the same, and I think that's why it probably didn't quite connect with its audiences as well. In the production, though, Jackie Chan broke his hand while filming one of the stunt scenes too. You can find out this all on the book I Am Jackie Chan: My Life in Action, which is a book he put together as well too. But one of the big things is, and I think this is one of the reasons he probably edited the film as well, is that James Glickenhaus, the director, and Jackie Chan didn't really get along in the film. And I think it's because of, the big thing is that Jackie Chan by this stage was such a big name in Hong Kong. He knew about where he wanted to go with different things in the film and stuff like that too. So, feeling that obviously the way Chan would do things, he's a perfectionist, so he obviously does a lot of takes, particularly the different fight scenes and stuff like that. But also, he knew his stuff so well that he even offered to direct himself. He's like, no, that's my job, Jackie. And there's a couple of walk-offs on set, all that sort of stuff. So I think the big thing in the end of the day is that maybe Jackie Chan didn't realise what he was in for with making this film. It's not going to be where he's pretty much can take over as director on movies and stuff like that. But I think that's what got a different performance out of Jackie in this, a harder edge, and I kind of like it. I think there's just something about that, and for me, it brings the film up to a 4 out of 5. I've got to say, I really enjoyed this film. Fantastic. The Protector, Jackie Chan. Folks, you've got to check this movie out. All right, as promised, the other film I'm quickly going to talk about here before we close up is the film directed by Robert Klaus, and that is, of course, the amazing Battle Creek Brawl. And he was directed, obviously, with a lot of the crew from Enter the Dragon, which is really, really interesting. Battle Creek Brawl, as it's also known out here in Australia, it is an amazing movie set in Chicago in the 1930s, but this film was actually made in Texas, folks. So Chan's coming into this and pretty much takes on the mafia. It's I suppose, a bit of a piss take of Godfather in parts. And Luca Brasi from The Godfather is in this. And of course, that is the actor Lenny Montoya, which is quite an interesting little part to sort of mix in the middle of that too. And again, it did well in North America and Hong Kong, but overall it went well below the sort of market standards that they expected to meet in this. And down here in Australia did all right, did not do quite as well. Obviously, the movies that did well had him playing, of course, in the Japanese racing car, the Cannonball Run, and of course Cannonball Run 2. Again, sort of facing that sort of thing with more comedic tone. But again, he was part of an ensemble in those. It didn't really push him as who he was, which is this amazing physical comedian, amazing athlete. It's just one of those things. And I think it wasn't until, as we've mentioned before, the likes of the films that you know now, Rush Hour, Rumble in the Bronx, Jackie Chan's First Strike, that we really got a sense of him hitting that sort of market too. So obviously he plays Jerry Kwan and is basically having a very leisurely life with Christine DeBelle, who plays Nancy, and of course his family, and he's got it's quite a nice little cast actually. And in the middle of that, after seeing him basically take on some hoods, the mob come round and basically want him to pay to be basically a fighter in this, and to become part of a tournament. And that's basically the crux of the movie itself. And he has to take on, the big bads in it as well. So starring as Dominici, we have Jose Ferrer, we have Mako as Herbert Kwan, who's his Sifu or teacher in this. We also have Ron Max as Ligeti, David Shiner as Morgan, Rosalind Chow's in this as May. Of course, if you don't know who Rosalind Chow is, you need to definitely check her amazing work out. Patty Johnson as Carl. Yes, you may know Pat. He's done some amazing work. Enter the Dragon's one of them. And Karate Kid. He had some hell good work with, of course. And, of course, we got Larry Drake as one of the judges and Jean LaBelle as Stroke. Yes, amazing Jean LaBelle. So, again, this is a movie that didn't quite hit the mark. I do remember seeing the movie on DVD a few years ago here in Australia, and I didn't get a lot in the way of features and stuff like that. But I really would like to have seen a little bit more about what Jackie thought of this movie afterwards too. And, he just didn't like, I think, the way of the working in the States at the time, particularly the punching, the kicking, the basic sort of run-of-the-mill fights. And there's no contact in a lot of those scenes because they shadow spar in a lot of those. It's faked by camera angles and all that sort of stuff. So for Jackie, it was kind of like taking a backstep and wasn't really what he was aiming to do. And of course, he's got his own preferred way of doing things, which we got to see back in 1995, a few years ago now, with, of course, Rumble in the Bronx. And that's it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But the movie's got a bit of a heart. You get to see some great stunts. You get to see him playing around on rooftops and stuff like that and doing some great work with that too. And overall, out here in Australia, it's quite a beloved little film. And unfortunately, Jackie Chan didn't see it that way, and of course others too. And I think that's one of the big things is that he wanted to do more, and it wasn't until a few years later that he got to do that, and still reap the rewards as well. Big Brawl for me is a 3.5 out of 5 on the Hell and Back scale, folks.
G'day, folks. Hope you're enjoying the great shows here on the Phantom Podcast Network. Be sure to check out all the great shows that we have on offer and subscribe on the master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. You can check Blood of Kings, a Highlander podcast hosted by Kevin the Raider Nerd Russell and Lee Fillingsness on their platform. You can also check out Culture Clash, which is the weekly look at pop culture hosted by Kevin and Kyle. Couch Potato Theatre. This is a cult classics and guilty pleasure podcast. Also Time Warp, a fandom flashback show. Endzone, a look at the NFL, American football. Also, Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, looking at the great films of Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation podcast, a Star Trek and Orville podcast, looking at Discovery and, of course, Picard, plus the Orville. But also, the Hair Metal podcast, looking at the great shows put on by the amazing bands back in the late 80s, their discs, their LPs, everything, all covering the fashion as well. Hosted by Kevin the Raider Nerd Reitzel. You can also check out Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast, hosted by Kevin and Dan Hadley, looking at all the eras of Doctor Who. You can also catch out What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast, an amazing show looking at Star Wars, hosted by Derek and Scott. And of course, our newest one, the amazing The Mullet Guild, an offshoot of the Lethal Mullet podcast looking at Frank Herbert's Dune universe. This is like an encyclopedia for Dune, where I take you through and down into the rabbit hole of Frank Herbert's amazing space opera, the sprawling universe which is going to be brought to life by Denis Villeneuve and December 18. You can check out all the shows there. Be sure to also go onto the social platforms on Twitter at FanPod Network. Let us know what you think of the shows and what else you can look at there. You can also check out great articles that we put up to there that we share. Also check out on Instagram and Facebook Phantom Podcast Network. Be sure to make sure that every Tuesday you check out the great work done by Making Treks as well. A brand new podcast looking at a deep dive of Star Trek hosted by myself, James Semple, and of course the ever popular and amazing writer of Star Trek and Star Wars, Mark Newbold. Go and check it out, folks, and we'll catch you next time here on the Phantom Podcast Network's The Lethal Mullet Podcast. Good afternoon, good evening, and good